Well, good morning. Today I'm going to show you how to make sourdough focaccia. So the first thing you're going to need is about 200 grams of mature sourdough starter build here, 1000 grams of flour, 700 grams of water. Now what you need to do is mix all those together so that you can leave them to stand for about 30 minutes or an hour to auto-lees. And exactly how to do this is in my other videos, which you'll find by clicking on the eye in the top right hand corner here or looking at the descriptions and the playlist. So here they are all mixed together and ready to stand for about an hour or so. All you have to do at this stage is make sure there's no dry areas at all on it anywhere and put a lid on it, and you don't put the salt in now, you put the salt in 30 minutes or an hour, and that's the auto-lyse or auto-lease as they say in French. So the auto-lease is now complete. It's had about 45 minutes or so. What we're going to do is add some salt. This is 1 tablespoon of salt. It's about 17 to 20 grams of salt. And to get that in, we're going to add just a little bit of water to it. This is about the same amount of water. It's 15 to 20 mils of water, which is 15 to 20 grams of water. And just get the salt in. Once the salt's in, give it a good stretching fold. Good stretching fold. Another one. Turn it over. And then we're good. And we're going to repeat that 6 times now. What we do is put some little markers here like these ones to show that we've got 5 more folds to go. So once your bread is ready, you're going to need to put some herb oil on it. So here's how to make the herb oil up. What you're going to do is take a small pot like this one, put in 1 cup, which is 225 mils or so of olive oil. To that you're going to add 1 chopped onion, which can be finely chopped. It's not too critical how finely chopped, just small enough to get in there. You're going to add 3 or 4 cloves of peeled and crushed garlic. I like garlic, so I'm on the 4 side here. I'll just get those squeezed in there. And it's good to have a good garlic flavour in there. Plenty of garlic. And then to that, we're going to add a tablespoon, 15 mils of salt, and about the same amount, a tablespoon or 15 mils of Italian herbs. And then if you've got it, fresh rosemary. If you haven't got fresh, then about ½ to 1 tablespoon of dried rosemary will work just fine. Get yourself a wooden spoon, stir it all up so that it makes a nice thick sauce there. You can see that there, it's everything mixed in. And what we're going to do is just warm that just a little bit now, but not so much that it boils or fries. So you're literally going to boil it for, say, maybe a minute or less. And it shouldn't boil, it shouldn't fry, it should still be warm enough to touch, but be very careful, don't actually stick your finger in it. Let's just do that now. And there it is, all warmed up. Now we just leave it while the bread is stretched out, so maybe half an hour, just to steep and get some really nice strong flavors in it. And we're going to use that to spread onto the focaccia in just a few minutes. So we've now completed 6 folds over the last 3 hours, and now it's time to take the focaccia dough and divide it into 2 and get it ready for topping. So the first thing we need to do is get it out of this container. which we can do with our hands. Best thing to do if you're using your hands is to wet them a little bit so they don't stick to the dough, just a little bit of water. Or if you prefer, you can also use your bench knife to get it out. But it's a small amount of dough, so you can pretty much pull it out with your hands if you want onto the counter. Works fine either way. Try not to use any flour here on the counter, or at least a very minimal amount. It's not really going to stick very much, and you don't want to add any flour to the actual dough at this point. So let's take our scale and divide this into two. You want it roughly even. It doesn't matter if it's not absolutely perfect, but you might as well get it as close as you can. That way it's easier to stretch out and also easier to make sure that it's going to cook at about the same speed as well. So let's just get that approximately even. That looks pretty good. Let's just check the other one here, make sure it's about right. And that looks great there as well. So there we are. These are ready now. You have to leave them on the counter for just a few minutes because they're going to need to relax because we're going to do quite a bit of stretching. So about 5 to 10 minutes on the counter. Get your tray and stretch them out. In the meantime, what we're going to do is separate out some of the garlic and the onion from our herb oil. Do keep that. It's really good stuff. It's going to give the focaccia a really nice flavor later on. So we're going to add the onion and the garlic. But for now, we just want the clear oil. So there's the onion, garlic, looks great. And the stuff in the sieve you can put back into the pot as well. So let's just do that. And now we've just got the clear oil, which is flavored with the herbs, ready for lining the trays. So let's go ahead and do that. So here's our tray. What I've done is put a silpat, which is a silicone liner on it. And you can also use Teflon. And if you don't have that, you can use baking parchment, but just don't use foil because the foil will stick to the focaccia and be very hard to separate when it's cooked. The oil is going to stop it from sticking and also be absorbed into the dough and give it a really nice texture. So don't be stingy on the oil. It does look like a lot, but it is soaked in and it's going to work really well and make a big difference. So make sure you use up all of that oil, which is about a quarter of a cup or so per focaccia. Let's stretch out the other one now. What you'll see is that when we put it on the tray, it resists it just a little bit at this point, so you stretch it out the best you can. Don't expect to get it all the way to the edges at this point. A little bit of oil first, and then you just let it relax on the tray for 5 or 10 minutes. Repeat the process a few times, and after about 3 goes over the next 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, you're going to see it's going to stretch out really easily. So there we go. Let's wait a couple of minutes and try it again in 5 or 10 minutes. So here we are, 5 or 10 minutes later. You can see it's already relaxed and ready to stretch out to our sort of second point, which is near to the rim of the tray, but not all the way out. Don't get it too thin here, otherwise you're going to end up with some very crunchy bits and very soft bits and uneven focaccia. Just try to make it as even as you can without pushing it too hard. There we go, that looks good. Gonna just even that out a bit and then let it stand for another 10 or 15 minutes. You can see it springing back in still. Here's the other one about the same stage. Let's just stretch it out the best we can. As you can see, it's still resisting it, springing back in. Don't worry about that. Just do the best you can. Let it stand for 10 or 15 minutes longer. Right, so here we are about another 10 or 15 minutes down the line, and you'll see now it's really ready to be stretched out all the way to the edges. Do the best you can. Much more relaxed, much happier being stretched. And that's about half an hour since we divided it or so. So it doesn't take too long, but you will need to be a little bit patient to get it to stretch out without springing back in again. There we go. That looks really good. And we can do the same for the other one as well. So now we're ready for the toppings. What we're going to do on this one is put olives and tomatoes. So we're going to get some green olives, which I'm going to cut in half or quarters. Here we go. Get some Kalamata olives, do the same, cut them in half. Don't use those black olives from tins. They're not as good as Kalamata. If you can get your hands on some decent olives, that really helps. And some tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes are good. I've cut them in half or into thirds. Just depends on how big they were to start with. And they're ready to go to be spread on top. So what we do now is take a little bit of the herb oil and put it on top. That's the clear stuff. Again, don't be stingy with the oil. It really looks like a lot, but it really isn't very much, and it's going to make a huge difference to the focaccia if you miss out the oil. So it's going to give a nice spongy, soft crust to it, and it'll be very crunchy if you don't put any oil on it at all. But that's your choice. So now we just stretch it out to the very edges. You can see it's nicely relaxed. Take your tomatoes, spread them out evenly. Gives it nice color all the way over to the edges. That's great. And then grab the olives, do the same, spread them out. Make it so it's sort of an even spread so that everyone gets to try each of the different flavors. And then some green ones. You don't have to put all the different olives on. It's just nice for color. Looks good with 3 types of topping. But if you want to just put one topping on, that works just fine too. Now you've done all of that, a little bit more oil and a little bit more of the garlic and onion from your herb oil mix. You can now sprinkle on the top if you like that flavor. We like the garlic, so that goes on to our focaccia, but if you're not a great fan of it, then you don't need to put extra on unless you particularly want to. There we go, sprinkle it over evenly. You put some sprigs of rosemary on, which works really well too. There we go, spread it out, get it even, and then that's about ready to just proof for a few hours. I leave it in the fridge overnight, which gives it a really nice soft texture. You can cook it in 3 to 4 hours from now if you want to prove it out on the counter with the cover on it. That's really your choice. I do recommend putting it in the fridge, retarding it for 8 to 15 hours in the fridge. It gives a much more unique texture to it when you cook it. But if you're in more of a hurry, 2 to 3 hours of proofing and rising will work just fine. So we also want to make sure that all of the olives and tomatoes are pushed into the dough. So just push them down like this just to make sure that they don't fall out after cooking when you're cutting it up. So make sure that they all get pressed in. Don't worry about just a little bit of pressure on the dough now. Won't affect the rise, but it will help a lot later on in the cooking process. So just get them all evenly distributed and pushed in like this. So it's proofed in the fridge now for 15 hours and is ready to cook at 450 Fahrenheit, 220 centigrade for 20 to 30 minutes until it's golden brown. So let's get it in the oven right now.